Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving right into a really complex situation unfolding right now in Bangladesh.
Hmm.
It's a nation that shares a vital and actually very long border with India.
Yeah, a huge border.
And what's happening there? Well, it has ripple effects, reaching all the way to New Delhi.
Exactly. We've been looking at quite a bit of material, articles, reports, various analyses that really lay out the key players, the simmering tensions, and frankly, the high stakes involved.
Right.
This isn't just a straightforward news item, is it? It feels much more like an unfolding geopolitical drama.
Yeah, right on India's eastern flank.
Precisely.
So think of this deep dive as us trying to cut straight to the heart of that drama. Our mission here is to pull out the most important insights from all this material,
Right.
so you can quickly grasp the core dynamics at play, why they matter, and maybe what could potentially be coming next for regional stability and, for India specifically.
Okay, so right at the very center of the situation, you have the interim government in Bangladesh. It's led by the 84-year-old Nobel Peace Prize winner, Muhammad Yunus. He stepped in as chief advisor back in August 2024.
That was after former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was, well, removed from power amidst those widespread protests.
Right. But while Yunus might have initially been seen by many as maybe a figure who could bring stability, international legitimacy,
It hasn't been smooth sailing.
not at all. Things have been far from smooth. There's this really palpable tension, particularly with the powerful Bangladesh army.
Yes, that tension became very public, didn't it? Very pointed.
It did. When the army chief, General Waker-uz-Zaman, after a meeting with his top brass, issued what felt like a major demand.
A demand that elections must be held by December 2025.
Yes, and with a legitimate, democratically mandated government taking charge by January 2026.
So a very clear timeline laid down by the military.
No ambiguity there. And the Army's perspective, as it comes across in the material, seems to be that this interim government, well, by its very nature, it lacks the democratic mandate.
To make big decisions.
Exactly. Big, long-term policy decisions. They used this exact reasoning, apparently, when they blocked that UN-proposed humanitarian corridor.
Ah, yes, the Rohingya Corridor. That was meant to link Myanmar's Rakhine state to Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh.
Hmm. And the Army's official stance was basically only a government with a popular mandate could okay something like that.
Which is interesting given the context.
What's also fascinating here is Yunus's reaction to this pressure. We saw reports that he actually threatened to quit.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reportedly felt the army was, essentially restricting his actions, preventing him from governing effectively.
Wow. That speaks volumes about the stakes involved, doesn't it?
It really does. After some intense discussions, apparently behind the scenes, and the material suggests he consulted widely
Who with?
with his advisors, obviously, but also the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the BNP,
Yeah.
and even the Jamaat-e-Islami.
Okay, quite a spectrum there.
Right. After all that, he decided to stay on. But that period, it really highlights just how precarious his position is and the depth of this power struggle.
And that consultation list itself is telling, like you said. The BNP long-standing opposition to the ousted Awami League. Jamaat-Islami, a more conservative, often controversial political force. The fact that Yunus felt the need to consult across that kind of spectrum, it just underscores the complex political currents he's trying to navigate.
Absolutely.
So you might be asking, okay, this is happening in Bangladesh, but why should I really care?
Right, the so what question.
Well, look, Bangladesh is a huge country, over 170 million people, and it shares that vast 4,096-kilometer border with India.
One of the longest land borders in the world.
Right, exactly. Instability there. It doesn't just stay contained. It has direct implications for India, for trade, for security along that border, and for the broader regional power dynamics that affect India.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think.
Go on.
This situation isn't purely domestic, not by a long shot. Major regional players are actively involved, adding layers and layers of complexity.
Absolutely. China, for instance, since Sheikh Hasina's departure, we've definitely seen China's influence in Bangladesh noticeably expanding.
And Muhammad Yunus's recent visit to Beijing, that provided quite a window into this. He made some remarks there that seemed, well, quite pointed.
Like what?
He highlighted India's northeast's reliance on Bangladesh for sea access, and he brought up the vulnerability of the chicken's neck.
The Siliguri Corridor, that narrow, critical strip connecting mainland India to the northeastern states.
Exactly. It felt like a very strategic statement, almost acknowledging China's growing proximity via Bangladesh to a highly sensitive Indian region.
That's quite a signal. And then there's Pakistan.
Right. In a move that certainly raised eyebrows everywhere, Yunus's government invited the Pakistani army.
To train Bangladeshi soldiers.
Yes, starting in February 2025. And this came shortly after a Pakistani cargo ship docked at Chittagong port.
Which was the first time that's happened in how long?
53 years.
Wow, 53 years. These aren't just symbolic gestures then. They signal a potential shift in regional alignments, wouldn't you say?
I think that's fair. And that brings us to a crucial question for India. Just how concerned should New Delhi be?
Well, the Siliguri Corridor, as you mentioned, is geographically close to the Chinese border.
Very close. And there's information suggesting real concerns about Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence, the ISI.
Looking for opportunity.
Actively looking for opportunities to cause trouble in the region. The very idea of Bangladesh potentially becoming a sort of base for anti-India activities, that's a significant security headache for India.
A major one. Let's layer in the Rohingya issue here again, because it's framed as a humanitarian crisis.
Which it absolutely is.
No question. Bangladesh has shouldered an immense burden, nearly 1 million Rohingya refugees from Myanmar since 2017.
An incredible strain.
But it's also, undeniably, a geopolitical hot potato.
Completely. And that army decision to block the UN aid corridor, while they cited the need for an elected government.
There might be more to it.
Well, some analysts suspect it could also be related to fears of, let's say, foreign influence in the border areas, perhaps linked to China's investments and activities nearby.
Okay, so another layer of complexity.
It just adds another dimension to why that military move might have been made.
Yunus's government is under immense pressure, isn't it? Domestically, internationally. Find solutions for this huge refugee population.
Huge pressure. But the Army's strong involvement in decisions like the aid corridor makes any potential move politically charged.
And for India, this creates a really complex challenge. On one hand, instability in Bangladesh could mean more refugees crossing the border, adding to India's own burden.
Right.
But on the other hand, a stable, yet perhaps anti-India-leaning regime in Dhaka, that could strengthen ties with strategic rivals like China and Pakistan.
Complicating India's position even further. It's a real tightrope.
So given this intricate landscape, this geopolitical chessboard, what kind of game plan does the information suggest for India?
Well, vigilance along that eastern border seems absolutely paramount. That comes through clearly, especially when you consider recent security events elsewhere.
Like the attack in Pahalgam in Jammu and Kashmir.
Exactly. Events like that just underscore the need for heightened alert across the board.
So strengthening intelligence gathering along the Bangladesh border feels essential.
Definitely. Specifically, monitoring potential ISI activity near the Siliguri Corridor, and of course keeping a very close watch on China's expanding footprint in Dhaka.
At the same time, though, maintaining diplomatic channels seems crucial, even when there are perceived differences or, shifts in Bangladesh's foreign policy leanings.
Absolutely. Diplomacy remains key. We saw the Indian High Commissioner attended Yunus's swearing in, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Which was seen as a signal, right, that lines of communication remain open despite the change in government.
And there's also, apparently, a push for regional cooperation.
Yes. Platforms like SARC, which Yunus has reportedly shown some interest in reviving. And also practical economic ties, things like recent trade deals for rice. These are ways to maintain a working relationship, keep the channels open, and perhaps exert some positive influence.
Okay. But at its core, this whole tussle, it really seems to be about the future of democracy in Bangladesh, doesn't it? And who gets to decide the timeline and the terms?
That feels like the heart of it. Yunus wants more time until at least June 2026 to implement his proposed reforms.
And he frames this as necessary to keep out what he calls authoritarian forces.
Right, specifically referencing the Awami League, Sheikh Hasina's party, which his government has actually banned.
A move that drew criticism from human rights groups.
It did, yes. On the other side, you have the army and the BNP, led by Khalida Zia, pushing for elections much sooner.
So it's a classic power struggle, interim leadership versus the military establishment versus major political parties, all vying for control over the country's path forward.
Exactly. And all the while, beneath this high-level political maneuvering,
there are the people.
There are the millions of average Bangladeshi citizens who are simply hoping for stability, for jobs, for security in their daily lives. Their aspirations are really the ground truth against which all this political drama plays out.
India's stakes couldn't be clearer, could they? A stable, friendly Bangladesh serves as a vital buffer. It contributes to India's own security, its economic interests.
Absolutely vital. An unstable Bangladesh, on the other hand, particularly one whose loyalties might be shifting towards strategic rivals.
That's a significant source of potential trouble right on the doorstep.
Right. And there's also that interesting detail we touched on earlier about General Zaman's planned retirement.
Mid-2026, right.
Yes, and this has led some analysts to speculate maybe Yunus is trying to buy time, perhaps hoping that a change in military leadership down the line could result in an army chief who is more agreeable to his reform plans, and a longer interim period.
Another layer to the calculation.
It just adds another layer to the intricate political calculations that are clearly at play here.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, you really have to consider the multiple layers converging here. It's quite something.
It is.
You've got the intense internal power struggle in Bangladesh, the interim government versus the army, compounded by the complex, ongoing humanitarian and geopolitical challenge of the Rohingya refugee crisis.
A huge factor.
And then the active external pressures and ambitions from regional players like China and Pakistan.
All playing out right on India's sensitive eastern border.
It's a potent mix.
India's response, based on the analysis we've seen, seems to require a very careful balancing act.
Constant vigilance along the borders.
Shrewd diplomacy to navigate this shifting political landscape.
And strategic thinking to counter the influence of rivals while somehow maintaining those crucial channels with Dhaka.
It's a tall order.
Yeah. The core question, I think, that hangs over this entire situation is this.
Oh.
In a country grappling so profoundly with its political future, how do these intense internal power dynamics intersect with the ambitions of regional and global players?
And ultimately, what does that mean for stability and security in one of South Asia's most critical, most densely populated regions?
It's dynamic, that's for sure, and it's definitely one to keep a very close eye on. It feels far from over.